Unit 7, Period 7, Section 11. Today we're going to talk about the domestic impact of World War II. That is, what did World War II do to Americans at home? Well, first of all, if you're going to win a war, one of the first things you have to know is that it is so important that the people of your country get behind the war effort. And we did this during World War II, and this is known as war mobilization. Here you can see the massive industrial effort to build bombers capable of destroying German, Italian, and Japanese cities. We're going to watch a short video on this effort by American industries and factories to support our troops during World War II, and this is known as war mobilization.
As the U.S. built its fighting forces, the President called upon the nation's manufacturing might to build the implements of war needed to fight the enemy.
We need everything that we have and everything that our allies have to defeat the Nazis and the fascists in the coming battles on the continent of Europe and the Japanese on the continent of Asia and in the islands of the Pacific.
The U.S. mobilization for war stands among the monumental achievements of American history. In record time, the U.S. economy is completely transformed from producing peacetime goods to maximum war production. FDR established the War Production Board, the WPB, to direct the effort, and he set demanding goals.
In this year 1942, we shall produce 60,000 planes, 45,000 tanks, 20,000 anti-aircraft guns. We will build 8 million tons of merchant ships.
Nationwide drives were organized to collect scrap iron and tin, rags, paper, even cooking fat to be recycled into war supplies. And metals and other raw materials were diverted for use in war production. New defense plants and shipyards sprang up seemingly overnight, and existing factories were converted to military manufacturing. Industrialist Henry J. Kaiser became a national hero as his shipyards built nearly 1,500 Liberty ships. Henry Ford's massive assembly lines turned out a B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. And the nation's railroads made delivering raw materials and war supplies their top priority. After a decade-long depression, war production revitalized the U.S. economy. Suddenly, a nation with too few jobs had to work overtime to supply the Allied effort. As the nation's men left for the fighting front, women joined the workforce to fill the vacant positions. Many of them took jobs in the defense industry, making Rosie the Riveter a legend of wartime production. Americans migrated from the rural South to work in the industrial centers of the North and West. Many were refused jobs because of race. As a result, President Roosevelt issued an executive order monitoring hiring discrimination in defense industries and the government, and established the Fair Employment Practice Committee to report on unfair work practices, opening the doors of employment for more than 2 million African Americans. But
this war mobilization or wartime conversion of our American industries enabled the Americans to supply the necessary war products that enabled us to win the war. Americans at home did their part also with rationing. Rationing is saving materials for our soldiers to be able to use, and Americans living in the United States to do with less. And the way the government did this was with rationing cards, as shown here in this photograph. Each family, based on its numbers of family members, were given a certain number of ration cards per month, and they would use these to buy their supplies they needed, their fuel, their bread, their milk, their sugar, and then everything else would be uh, positioned in such a way to be sent to our forces overseas so that they could win the war. Um, Everything was rationed in America, even silk, as shown here in this photograph. Ladies who at that time silk pantyhose was the fashion had to do without their silk pantyhose, so their friends would actually draw the lines that would make the ladies look like they still had silk pantyhose on, but in fact it was just mascara pencils which had drawn the lines on their legs. So everybody was involved in helping the United States win the war. As shown in the video, women played a tremendous role, just as they had during World War One. Rosie the Riveter, pictured here, was a symbolic woman who worked in the factories and took the place of the jobs that men had done prior to the war. Here's another example. The last domestic impact of the war, probably not as positive, is a decision made by our national government to inter or to imprison Japanese, Italians, and German Americans while the war was going on. Camps were built in the east and the west, most of them out west to house Japanese Americans, but also a few in the east, in the state of Arkansas, for German and Italian Americans. And the purpose of these internment camps were to hold these men and women until the war was over so that we could limit the amount of spying and espionage that was going on in our country. Here's an example of a Japanese internment camp. The most famous of the internment camps was known as Manzanar, and it was a location for Japanese Americans. Here's a poster that was published all in the western part of the United States and posted all over the western part of the United States, telling Japanese Americans when they should report to these internment camps. Here's a picture of a Japanese American citizen living in the internment camp. This concludes Unit 7, Period 7, Section 11 on the domestic impact on the United States of World War II.